Today's Take 5 with the Saints, May the 5th, is a little different, and that's not really a celebration today. Today is a day called the Martyrs of the Reformation Era. It is a day in which the church is called more to be penitent and mindful of its role, not just in how it has treated people outside of the faith and its treatment of Native Americans or people where the church has colonized and mistreated the locals, but it is today particularly focused on how we have treated each other in our disagreement. And in today's date, it is focused on that period of the Reformation in which Christians killed Christians because of their disagreements over theology and sometimes very small minutiae in the grand scheme of things. Our scripture that goes with this day comes out of 2 Corinthians chapter 4, verses 5 through 12. For we do not proclaim ourselves. We proclaim Jesus Christ as Lord, and ourselves as your slaves for Jesus' sake. For it is the God who said, "Let light shine out of darkness," who has shone in our hearts to give the light of the knowledge of the glory of God in the face of Jesus Christ. But we have this treasure in clay jars, so that it may be made clear that this extraordinary power belongs to God and does not come from us. We are afflicted in every way, but not crushed, perplexed, but not driven to despair, persecuted, but not forsaken, struck down, but not destroyed, always carrying in the body the death of Jesus, so that the life of Jesus may also be made visible in our bodies. For while we live, we are always being given up to death for Jesus' sake, so that the life of Jesus may be made visible in our mortal flesh. So death is at work in us, but life in you. Perhaps this is the greatest lesson to learn as we remember this day. It is not ourselves that we proclaim, but we proclaim and glorify Jesus Christ in all things. Paul is writing to the church in Corinth, a church in which he has invested very deeply in his time and his energy and his prayers, and reminding them that he has some significant disagreements with them, but he is not going to take out those disagreements by force to compel them to believe, but rather reminding them that it is the death of Jesus which has compelled him to proclaim these words and encouragement and correction to them, and to know he offers correction not out of a position of power, but rather out of powerlessness. This is a lesson we could hold fast to remember in the church today, but one in which certainly was not quite at play in the Reformation era. The Reformation took place over 500 years ago. The anniversary was just a few years ago. This day, this commemoration today is fairly recent in our calendar. This comes out of our lesser feasts and fasts list of saints and special days. It is a day which commemorates particularly the 40 martyrs of England and Wales, men and women, who between the years of 1535 and 1679 were executed either for their allegiance to the fledgling Church of England or to their continued faithfulness to the Roman Catholic Church. A few examples of these 40 martyrs on the Catholic side, very early, in fact, in that opening year, 1535, you have these two men on your screen, Bishop John Fisher and Sir Thomas More, who you might be much more familiar with the latter. Thomas More, the Lord Chancellor under Henry VIII for a few years, both of whom refused to recognize Henry as the supreme head of the Church of England, and also refused to take the act or the oath of allegiance to him, and also didn't recognize his annulment that he was seeking to his first wife, Catherine of Aragon, and as such they were both quickly dispatched once they made it clear they were not going to give him their ultimate allegiance. On the other side, you have three Anglican bishops, noteworthy names, Thomas Cranmer perhaps being the most familiar of these three men, who was the Archbishop of Canterbury and the architect of our Book of Common Prayer, along with Bishops Hugh Latimer and Nicholas Ridley, who were all executed under the reign of Mary I, who was hoping to return England back to the Roman Catholic Church after her father and her brother had allowed Protestant leanings to take over in a good part of the church and the politics of England at that time. But most importantly for today, it is a recognition that the church, as we can celebrate the many gifts of the Protestant Reformation and the subsequent Catholic Counter-Reformation, also has to take account for the sins it committed and how we treated each other. The biography out of Lesser Feasts and Fasts for this day speaks of this. By our baptisms we are incorporated into God's one church, and thus we are the heirs of both the martyrs and their executioners. Today we are called to be mindful of the fact that, yes, there are still significant disagreements within the church. This is not something that is worth shedding blood over, but it is something that arouses and should the passions of those who hold these different beliefs. It is a reminder to us also to listen to the words of Paul, who says that the power of God is manifest in these clay jars, which above all manifests the death of Jesus, and the power that comes from our lives is proof positive that it is only God who can bring us together. It is only God who can heal our differences, and ultimately it is God who we proclaim at the end of the day, not our own personal agenda. I hope that we can use this day, all of us, to be mindful of the sins past and present and future of the church, but to find a way in which we can deal with those sins in a way that instead of turning to violence, we turn to God to seek peace, penance, reconciliation, and ultimately for all of us to claim the hope that is in Jesus Christ. Thanks for joining me. Look forward to being with you for our next Saint of the Day tomorrow. Take care.